Yeah,
So,
we got a quorum, let's start.
so
Yes.
Change on the 80,000?
I did. I put the K in, I changed the difference.
Because they might bring it up.
Yeah, I know, because I didn't send it out.
good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Hamilton Affordable Housing Trust first of the New Year meeting. It's January 3rd. We've got a few items to go over, so we've got a quorum. So I thought we'd get rolling. So the first item on our agenda is to have a look at the meeting minutes of December 10th. You had a chance?
Yeah, I did. I thought they were fine.
Yeah, I had a chance to look through them yesterday, the day before. They look to be A-OK and accurate as to our conversations of the 10th. So I'd like to see if we could have a motion to approve these meeting minutes.
I'll make a motion that we approve the December 10th meeting minutes.
Okay, and second?
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. That's unanimous, thanks. We've invited Don Prescott in from Habitat for Humanity, Preston, who is the guiding light here in Hamilton with the effort of Habitat. And just a few weeks back, 2 homes became occupied to 2 lovely families, and there was an open house just a few weeks back. And I thought it would be a nice idea to have Dawn come in and give us a little rundown as to how things went and future plans. And I will comment for myself that I visited, I think, to 2 open houses, saw both homes, met both families, and it's really good stuff, and it's appreciated.
So, Dora Fox had asked me to put together a presentation on the process, and so it's fairly brief, but so we started at 270 Asbury. Well, we started with an invitation from the Affordable Housing Trust to do some work in Hamilton. And Fred Mills was at the time the chairman, and the idea was locate a property and bring it to us and see if we can't make something happen. So we did, and we actually came up with 2 properties on Asbury Street. One was 270 and the other was 89. They were both on the market, similar price at the same time. There was an interest from the trust, so we made offers on both of those. The offer on 270 Asbury was accepted, and we then started the negotiation period with the owners because the process is rather involved when you come to acquiring a property. The marketplace right now, as you probably know, is a 45-day turnaround probably from an offer to actually putting money down and acquiring the property. And for us, it's a good 120 days, especially, and one of the things I'd like to speak to is the friendly 40B process. It is a process. It has a clock ticking. It takes a certain amount of time to do. There's multiple steps. If it was a larger process, you would hire a consultant to actually do the whole process. I did it myself. I've done it several times. But this effort of creating 2 affordable units on 1 lot and doing it through the 40B process, even with all the support, and Dora's office was very supportive because there's a lot of parts that have to be put together on that. It's a burden on the state, and it's a burden on us as Habitat to have to go through that process. And I would suggest the possibility of a zoning change that would maybe address placing, if you're doing affordable housing at a certain range, that you allow 2 units on a single lot and not force this friendly 40B process. It is a long, involved process, and we did it successfully. It requires support from the state. We also had a mass historic review of the site. That takes 30 to 45 days for their review. We had an environmental protocol through HUD that we had to do. That's a multi-page document with, again, support of Doors office to get that through. So all of those pieces were put together. We had to do a site plan, which you see here, and just a copy of the original deed. And we took over the property and started the process of demolition, which we did by hand with volunteers, and we took the house down. But prior to that, we had an asbestos removal company come in and do an inspection and remove any asbestos, and there wasn't much. It was like around furnace fittings and some floor tiles. And then the fire department was invited in, and they actually ran, they didn't burn the house down, obviously, but they actually ran multiple exercises in the house. And I had a picture, chose not to use it, but one day I went in, opened the back door, and there's a body lying there, a fireman, and I'm like, oh! And it was a dummy they use in practice in rescue missions. And so they did quite a thing in there, but that was very dramatic to see, and hoses all over the place. But after we demoed it, we started the process of a foundation. We had DMS, an architectural firm from Beverly, donated their services and designed the homes and pulled together all the building documents. And at this process, we also engaged with Essex Technical High School. And this has been a very positive step for us. And this was the first time that Essex Tech, in recent time, has actually worked on a house on site. So their arborists came and started the initial work of tree removal. Their carpentry team came and prefabricated doors and windows, and then actually worked on framing on the house. And the electrical and plumbing worked to do all the rough and then all the final, did the heating systems. We also, in these houses, had a grant program that was working with us that allowed us to put a solar thermal system in at no charge to us and no charge to the homeowner in the end. That'll reduce their heating costs dramatically. The estimate is $600 a year, with this augmenting the hot water system. We work with volunteers. We have a core group of volunteers that have skill sets. And then, as you can see here, a group, the group putting up the walls, college kids, corporate groups, all working on site, and we would lead them in that process. And you know, in the bottom, in the middle, is the Y Executive Board from the YMCA of the North Shore. For instance, different banks, and again, as I say, colleges. Every Saturday, we have 1 and 2 and 3 colleges on board. And that's Endicott College, always on our site. We had Gordon College on site. I think that's Gordon kids with the shovels. And Harvard, MIT, and Tufts in a constant rotation. And the houses were, you know, built from the ground up, Energy Star compliant. We insulated it, framed it, sided it, did all that work. The project took a little longer than we normally would like, but that was working with the school system and working around their schedule, which, you know, they leave at the end of May and don't get started till the middle of September. And we had to sort of have everything coordinated so we were ready when they were available. And we just ran out of time in the roughing so that we couldn't get the finish work done until they came back. And you can't get another electrician or plumber to come in and do finish work on somebody else's permits. So that caused us to have a delay. The finished job, I'd say the difference between our house and a higher end house is going to be the finished components. But the structure of the house is the same, where we build to the same code. Each of these houses came in at an independent appraisal at $475,000. So you're looking at a site that had a dilapidated house, that had a sale value of $230,000, $260,000, a value of approximately that. And now you have a property, a combined on this lot of $950,000. This is the Unit 1, and as you can see, you know, we have each of them have a porch. The houses are basically the same structure. They're different on the interior, and one has the front porch on this end of the house, and the other is going to have it on the side of the house, facing the street. But this is an upstairs bedroom on the bottom left, the kitchen, a bathroom. Camera lens wasn't wide enough to get the shower, but there is a bathtub shower next to it. There are 2 bathrooms in this house, upstairs and down. The idea is that we want to make the house, at least on the first floor, handicap ready, so that all the doors are wide enough for a wheelchair. There's a turning radius in the downstairs bathroom, again for a wheelchair, and ready access. This is the other house. The red house, you can see where the porch is, again, on the side. And in the upper right, you see the downstairs with utilities. So you have the washer and dryer, and right next to it, that is the furnace, that box on the wall. And then over here to the left is the water tank that's for the solar system. So that preheats the water, and then it goes into the baseboard, and the boiler will only call for water when the temperature gets really cold or you go over your demand on it. And then downstairs, the rest of these, the middle pictures are all downstairs. It's the kitchen, the living room, and then you can pick up again the stairway going upstairs. A unique feature of this is we cut through on the stairway, and we have a plexiglass lining those openings so that when you're in the kitchen, you can see into the dining area. And in this case, the homeowner had a friend who built 2 barn doors. So both bathrooms have barn doors on them from wood that's over 200 years old. Unique little feature for the house. And this is the dedication that we took place. Both families are in there. They were in there as of that date. We're in the process of closing documents right now. So they are living in there and are in there through the holidays. These pictures don't show it, but there is now a paved driveway. And we worked on Lincoln is a shared, on Summer Street is a shared driveway with another homeowner. And we split the cost of repaving that whole driveway with that homeowner when we were done with construction. And we have 2 paved areas that allow for 2 parking for each. There's actually more room than that. And then that's our close.
Nice, very nice. Okay.
Wow. Both families are under 60% of area median income. They're actually under 50%. So we're looking at low-income families being served. Their monthly payments will be right around $1,000. That includes taxes, mortgage, and condo fees, and insurance.
So, Don, thank you. When we started the process and looked at funding it for us, it was a transaction that was moving things, just moving in the right direction. When you realize the thousands of hours of volunteer work and the organization and the effort, you realize that it's a lot more than just a transaction. And you realize, and it was beautiful to walk through. It was really nice meeting your board, having them articulating the volunteer effort to synchronize it. And this presentation sums it up. But it's just amazing work, and it goes far beyond what, we thought we were just, expensively funding a transaction, and it really just shows up in the quality of the work and the dedication that your team put towards it. So very much appreciated.
Thank you.
You got any more?
Well,
Now that you mention it,
I
remember the expensive part of it?
I do.
I would, it is expensive, and there is no way around that. No matter what your project is, the subsidy has to come from someplace. So what we bring to the table is taking the labor off the table. We had a donation, as I say, of the solar thermal. We had a donation of roof. We had some insulation donated. And then, of course, with plumbing and electric and all that, we had the labor donated. And in some cases, some of the wire was donated from a supplier. There's a patio I didn't show here, all bricked in. That was done by the masonry. That was donated brick. There'll be a front walkway we just ran out of weather time, and that'll go in the spring, and that'll be an all-brick walkway, and that's donated. So it's all these pieces that make it so that we can sell the house for $145,000, $140,000. So it's subsidized
Yeah.
heavily, and that's what it has to be to reach this income level, which is basically a working salary. You're looking at families earning to qualify for this home, you had to earn between $36,000 and about $60,000.
So when we spoke at the open house, you briefly went over the number of people that had applied and how it narrowed down to a selection.
Yep.
Is there, that would be worthwhile, I think, for people to know just what level of interest there was in it, so.
There were close to 100 applicants, but that quickly gets narrowed down very rapidly. We encourage everybody to apply and nobody to disqualify themselves. Fill out the application. We're more than willing to disqualify you when it comes to that. And so once you go through the income qualifications and the need for the bedrooms, because these were 2-bedroom units, so if you had a family of 8, you were disqualified right away. So little things like that. And by the time we came down, we were down to 27. And then we had a local pool, because we had a local preference. So in one home is somebody that actually is from Hamilton, has lived in Hamilton, and previously lived on Asbury and was living in Asbury Grove. And so she was the local component, and the other family was from Beverly. And but it is a process, and we go through income qualifying those families. We have a package in the funding through the Federal Home Loan Bank. So that was a whole other level of qualifications that we had to meet. But we service families in the 40 to 60% area median income. And speaking of other projects, I have talked to two owners in town. Left a message with one, and another is saying come back in the spring. So I don't have anything right now, but I do have a property that is close to foreclosure that may be a workable. We would love to work here again.
I think we'd love to have you. The end result is shockingly beautiful and wonderful.
It's a wonderful place for people to live, right? I mean, it's amazing to me that you had 100 applicants, and you got down to 24 that needed to be further screened. I mean, that just goes to reinstate the demand that is here locally. It may not be all Hamilton-based, but the last couple of years, we've had people sort of say, well, we don't really have a demand locally. And, it's fair to say that, yeah, we do.
We don't want to locally.
Well, I mean, because that's part of the public meeting discussion would had people say, we don't need this type of affordable housing. And it's like,
Either
no,
exists
you do.
or it doesn't, right?
Yeah, so thank you, again.
No, there were multiple, and some that got disqualified were larger families that applied, and smaller, singles.
Of the applicant pool of about 100 families, how many were local Hamilton folks? Do you know?
No,
Is that something you would track?
I'd have to look back and see if I did. I don't know if I did. Did I ever?
You never gave me anything.
Yeah. No, I don't know.
Be a curious number, I suppose.
I know that in the final local preference, I think there were 6 or 7 families in that.
So once it was narrowed down, the one local preference was, had-
Still 25% of or so
Of the qualified.
remaining applicants, right?
Yeah.
Yep,
Don, thank you.
thank you.
Do you want to comment, Dave?
Just a question, out of my own ignorance, are these deed restricted in perpetuity?
Yes, yep, they come with a deed restriction, so the families can resell them, but they will get a bit of appreciation, but it'll stay within that 140 range for a number of years.
That carries forward.
That carries forward, yep, and it has to be another income-qualified family.
Sure.
Now, just because we've raised that question before, these are taxed as if they're market rate units. I think the town collects its taxes on it, right?
They'll be taxed based on the assessed value,
Right.
but because of the deed restriction,
There
they
may
have,
be an adjustment.
right, so they can be about a 15% discount.
So that's kind of dramatic, like it's not 140, it's 15% off of what
Right.
it would otherwise be worth, right? So that's-
Yes.
But what I heard earlier was, originally there was one house on this lot,
Correct.
which had a value of X, which the town taxed at full valuation.
Like 230
So
or
we've got
something,
two
right?
houses here at 900,000 is what you said.
Yep.
At 15% less the normal tax. I think the town is coming out ahead on this as well. I
Oh,
think.
definitely.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If there was just one house, it would come out ahead, but with 2 of them. So for the investment you made, that's the return you
And
got.
when does the trust, or has the trust gotten the sort of recorded credit for these 2
Has
units?
it been recorded to the SHI?
So that would have been a building permit, would have been the application.
It has to go with the occupancy and the closing, so that's where we're at right now.
Those houses are in closing now. When they close, you'll report them to the state, and the state will credit us 2 more units.
Well,
Door will.
yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Door will report it to the state, and it'll get credit to our SHI. Excuse me.
Well, actually go to DHCD and
Right.
they'll
And
automatically.
they'll audit it on the
Because it is a
subsidized
40B.
housing inventory.
Yep.
Do you have an idea how many people work, do you track how many people volunteer to work on these houses? Is it 100, is it 1,000, what is it? No, any guess?
Well, you could say that on most build days, and we had 2 build days a week, there were 20 to 30 people. It's a lot. And when you have a bunch of people coming that you have to show them how to use a measuring tape, how to hold a hammer, where the most exciting thing is a chalk line. And I don't know if you've ever had the pleasure of using a chalk line, but when you pull it out and you snap it, and all of a sudden there's a red line across something, and everybody goes, wow. And you're like, so
It's fun.
quite a learning curve. So it,
Dave?
So you got all these folks that are working on the job, and they don't know how to use a tape measure. How do the insurance arrangements work? What if one of these folks falls in the excavation and breaks his neck or whatever?
Habitat has insurance.
Habitat
Yes.
insures the
Yep.
volunteers?
Well, they sign a waiver.
Okay.
They do that, and so we have that waiver, but we have insurance through Habitat. And Habitat is a national organization with like 1,400 affiliates. And we all operate on the same guidelines, and We try to ensure. Well, we successfully did here. Nobody fell in.
No, but if you're dealing 20 people a weekend, even if it's the same
Yep.
20 people, you're dealing with 100 people a weekend times the 5 months it takes to build this thing. Talking a lot of volunteers.
Hundreds of volunteers, yeah, it's good.
Oh, hundreds.
Hundreds, yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay,
Thanks,
Rob.
that was fantastic. So our next line item number 3 is a bit of discussion about 59 Willow Street. This is a discussion about what Harbor Light, or where Harbor Light stands presently. And my understanding is that Harbor Light is no longer interested in the Willow Street project and is not going to move forward. That information came to me, might have been from you, Dora, I don't remember exactly
I did
from
send
who.
it
but-
out to the Affordable Housing Trust, the Community Preservation Committee, and the HDC, since all of you were involved. And Harbor Light basically said to me that, that they were having issues. There was a lot of effort to go through the small project program that was set up by the state, and they thought that it was an enormous amount of effort in relation to how many units they were receiving. And so they decided that they didn't think that they could go forward with a second project. They were currently working on a small project with the town of Beverly that was similar, and so they decided not to go forward. So we voided the check for $300,000. We've sent them back their deposit of $2,500, and basically the project's closed out at this point, and the HDC will reissue an RFP at some point for the property.
Does the,
Could you speak up, please?
does the money that gets returned, that gets voided, that was never taken out of, was that all CPC funds? Or was that, which bucket does that go back into?
A portion of it goes back into the CPC budget, a portion goes back into your budget, and we don't quite have the numbers yet. That's why Marissa was actually coming into the meeting. She's trying to figure out how much is going back to CPC, how much is coming back to you. I think you'll get, in the end run, you'll have between 460 and 500,000 in your account.
Okay.
Probably a little bit closer to the 500,000. They're gonna get a little bit more money than CPC is gonna get a little bit more money than I initially thought.
Yeah, because we had originally, if I remember correctly, articulated that the 250,000 that was allocated at the town meeting was used there. So the presumption is that that money would have been from the CPC. And so, as long as you.
That was my original understanding, but now it's turning out that some of that money that I thought was gonna be returned to you will possibly be returned to the CPC. But not that much, you'll get most of the money.
I actually thought most of it would go back
I
to the
mean,
CPC.
most of it, well, actually, most of it'll go back to the CPC.
Okay, that's what I thought it should go, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So Marissa's working on it, and we'll hear at a later point how
Yes.
that shakes out?
Yes, exactly.
Okay. Any, I don't know that we need to say much more about what's going on at Willow at the moment, I don't think.
It's up to the
We'll wait
HDC to figure out what they want to
What
do.
they want to do next, right? So, maybe if I can get it into my schedule, I'll come forward and listen in on a couple of Wednesday morning meetings to see
Okay.
what's going on.
Yeah, at this point, I think it's gonna take a little while before an RFP is
Right.
reissued, because they're talking of doing a market study to figure out what would be the best use of the property. It might not necessarily be affordable housing. It might be market rate housing, or it might not even be housing. So as a result, they're gonna do the market study, then they're talking about possibly pre-permitting a project and then issuing an RFP.
Based on the market study.
Based on the market study,
Yeah,
yes.
their interest here, I believe, and I don't want to speak for them, but in conversations that I've had with the chairman and the planning department, given their interest in trying to make an investment in improvements on Railroad Ave and Willow and the general downtown area, their interest at this point is to get maximize their return on their investment in 59 Willow, so that they have money to invest in improvements for the whole of downtown, so.
If they deliver, if they end up selling a permitted new project rather than just the land that go, they'll get a lot more, so
Right, so-
that would,
So I think
Be a
they're
great
on
win.
that track now, again, not to speak for them, but they're on that track now to try to maximize their return, so they have the most money they can to invest in
downtown.
downtown.
Okay.
Excellent. So, Joe, you had mentioned that line item number 4 here is that you've invited Dave Calhoun.
Well, with the board's permission, we invited Dave.
Yeah, that's right, so.
So, just very little bit of background. I don't know Dave. We'd never met before tonight. We've had 2 phone conversations. Dave reached out to me several weeks ago with some interest in kind of getting the town's temperature on 40B projects in general, and to let me know that his firm was looking at a couple of potential properties to invest in here. I made you all aware of that at the last meeting, and you invited me to invite him to come in and let us know what you guys want to do. So I'm trying not to speak for you or put anything out there.
Great introduction.
Dave, could you come up to the podium,
As
please?
long as it's an accurate introduction, that's all I care about.
It's as close as we're going to get. My name is Dave Calhoun. I own a small real estate development company called Leyline Ventures, and my partner, Chris Barati Properties. Chris and I have known each other for 30 years now. We both come more from the construction side of the world, but we also do a tremendous amount of private development. We try to focus on the places where people say you can't do great things, and then we go and do them. We just came from Weston, and it was great that we got here early and got to see your presentation for Habitat for Humanity, because they might be able to help us out, because Weston is having trouble with a historic building that's on our property that we offered to donate, and they're just trying to get their arms around their ability to relocate it, put it on a foundation, and turn it into some affordable housing. So the introduction to Don tonight is a great help for us, because we'll pass that on to the town of Weston. But what we try to do is we try to find a town that is low on their percentage as far as affordable housing. We try to take a site that's as small as we possibly can. And for example, in Weston, we're on 2.1 acres and we're doing 150 units. We do that by doing structured parking, so that we're doing a more, what I would call a more modern facility than your typical 40B player, where they want to do garden style, surface parking, and they want to take 25 acres to do 200 units. What we try to do is keep the footprint as small as we possibly can. And the product that most people are looking for right now is they really love what they call Podium Plus 5 or Podium Plus 4, which is you come onto the property, and because the building footprint is small, you're able to keep strong buffers to your neighbors. You're able to keep a very grand entry, so that when you go by it, you don't see the building, you see a nice entry. But when you come onto the property, you go into a parking garage. You're not surface parked. The cars are hidden. You get on the elevator and you go up to your apartment. We pursue rental product. We're not looking to do a for sale product, and most towns look for the rental product because under your goal to reach 10% with the state, you get full credit. If we, for example, did 200 units in your town and it was rental, you would get the full credit for 200 units. I think currently, I think Hamilton probably needs about 230, maybe 240 units to get you past the 2020 census, maybe a few more. And from what I understand, just truly just going through the newspapers and things, you guys have had a tough time getting it done. You had a project that was, I guess, that was fairly well supported, but then it came that the developers were looking for money, and we're looking for the town to kick into it. We can tell you without a doubt, we're not here looking for your money. We're looking for your support. We're looking for your cooperation. We don't want to necessarily do a 40B in a town that's not going to support us, because it's just not worth the aggravation. We can go look to a town that would embrace the product. So that's what we're looking to do. We put together some of the best teams in Weston. Stantec Engineering, I don't know if you know of them. One of the largest in the world now. I've been working with that team since 1998 when they were, I forget what their original, was it Face Buffett and Thorndike way back then was their original name, but been working with them forever. Smook Architects is one of the better planners and designers that we work with. We then have Allen and Major, who does our civil work. We then have Cosentini, who does our code work. And then we usually use Vanessa Associates on our traffic, mainly because the guys at Vanessa Associates are great presenters. They're great at explaining what they're doing to the public, and they're great at addressing the true concerns of the neighborhood. We use, in our last project, we used Prince LaBelle on our legal side. We try not to use a lot of legal. We're not looking to come and say, oh, I want you to meet our project manager. It's attorney such and such. We'd rather not bring our attorney ever, if possible, because it makes for a better project. But all that being said, we would like to find out if the town would embrace the idea of us trying to acquire property in town, probably somewhere in the magnitude of less than 12 acres. Maybe even as small as 5 acres, and maybe even smaller. I mean, if you have something downtown we could buy from the town, that'd be a different story. We'd love to grab that, but right now we're just talking to different private parties. We initially wound up in Hamilton because you have a very, very large piece that's out there for sale, but that's going to be bought by somebody who's going to do a for sale product and most likely do neighborhoods. We don't want to do a neighborhood. But what we'd like to do is see if the town would support us doing what I would call a friendly 40B. We'd acquire a property, we'd put it under contract, we'd then work with your zoning board after we go through Mass Housing to get our site eligibility letter and try to get a deal, a project that the town would embrace, both from appearance-wise, use-wise, and profit-wise. And one of the things that often jumps up is when we're doing these type of deals, people ask the question, say, oh, well, geez, you're taking property and you're going to be turning it into a residential use. And I don't know if Hamilton has a split tax code, but some towns do, and everybody gets wound around the axle about what kind of revenues you're going to get. Well, if we do 200 units on even a beautiful piece of property that may cost $2 or $3 million here in town, the tax revenues, the excise tax, just from the vehicles that wind up getting parked in the building is more than the tax revenues you got when there was just a $3 million home. So it really starts to turn to the positive. And we're very good at doing our own on-site wastewater systems. We're very good at working with DEP, making sure that we respect all the things in conservation. Our project in Weston, and think about Weston for a minute. They really don't want any development in that town. We had 6 months of hearings before the ZBA, and in the 6 months of hearing, there was not one citizen that came to oppose us. We thought we'd have the pitchforks day one. Not one citizen came to oppose us. The only one who opposed us was the selectman. And the selectmen had a different project that they were looking to do, and we got in their way. We stepped in front of them. So it created heartburn for them. So we're looking to avoid that. We're looking to see if you guys would embrace it. If we did have the Affordable Housing Trust support in Weston through the whole process from the first time we walked in the door. And we worked very hard. Our original design required us to go to conservation and get some relief from conservation. We pulled back. We completely redesigned our building to get us 100% outside of conservation's concerns. It cost us a good 60 days and probably $90,000. But we were able to do it. And it makes our project a little bit tougher to build, a little bit more expensive, but at the end of the day, it was even got the support as close as you can get from support from conservation. Conservation typically writes a letter saying you're outside their jurisdiction. They don't usually write you a love letter no matter what you're doing, but we got there. So we hope to have that project. That project was denied by the zoning board out there, despite the support, so we hope to be through, maybe Mass Housing Appeals Committee grants it to us and we're able to build it, but we would like to avoid that here in Hamilton and find a piece. Ideally, it'd be great to find something that's, first choice would be downtown, right by the railroad station, but otherwise up one of the major roads, not in a neighborhood, so that, you know, people come out and they're not having to meander through a long road through the neighbors. And we do things very, very differently when we look at our development. We spend an awful lot of time looking at what somebody's going to think about what our building looks like. And we spend a lot of time trying to make sure that the quality of what we're going to do is off the charts. Because in the end, it makes our investment that much stronger.
So you own and operate these?
No, what we do is at that point, we make a business decision that we can build it, we can build it and hold it. But typically, and often you'll find with most municipalities is they would rather see one of the top institutional firms who ultimately typically buys everything anyways, come in and manage it, you know, bring in a national player to manage and own it. But we can do it either way. And as far as our ability to self-fund and do it, I'm more than happy to share it with you. It's public record from our filing on the Weston project. When you file for a site eligibility letter with Mass Development, Mass Housing, whoever you apply with, they ask you for a letter of the ability to fund, and we have a letter to Barati Properties from Eastern Bank assuring that $52 million would be not an issue whatsoever for us to borrow if that was the choice. And that actually is through a very strong relation Chris actually has with Eastern. I have relations with other banks. But the biggest thing is, that was wild, huh?
He's a man-eater.
Well, he kept going. That didn't even slow him down.
But one of the other things that a lot of
Guys, I wasn't trying to flick him towards you. I kind of thought that would do more damage.
a lot of the other things that people seem to get a question about is when you say you're doing affordable housing. It's not really affordable anymore. When you look at it, affordable housing under the 40B law puts them at 80% of the median area income. So it's pretty strong rents that people will be paying, even meeting that threshold. And the other thing too is there's no real, you can walk on to any 40B project that has been built in, I would say, the last 10 years, and you cannot tell the market from the affordable, and that's the way the state wants it.
Yeah.
In Weston's 150, right?
Correct.
How many would be affordable? 20%?
25% of that are affordable. I think we have 153 there? 150? Yeah. So I think it winds up to, I'm doing the math top of my head, is that 38 or 39? But
So when you said podium plus 4 or 5, parking deck, and then 4 stories of.
What we try to do is we try to bury the first deck.
Okay.
So if we have to, we'll try to put most of that so that when you wind up with your building we'll try to keep it as low as we possibly can. But typically you want 4 stories of residential living, 3, 4, and 5, and that's what we.
Might be a 5-story building.
Correct.
So you're talking about I just want to clarify, I think in today's construction world, you're talking about a first level that's steel framed and then wood framed above?
Most likely to be steel or be cast in place.
And then wood framed above the
Correct.
first?
Yep, it's fully sprinkled, meets all the energy codes, be fully elevated. As far as, elevators, it would include amenity areas, it would include, we typically look at doing all kinds of different things with, like, our parking. You'll find there's a study out by the Metro Planning Association about parking, and most of the developments you'll see, even in nice suburban towns like this, you still wind up with a big parking lot with nobody in it. The parking ratio that we thought we would need in Weston came back that all we really needed was 1.3. We have 1.5. But now most younger people, they don't even want the car. They want the Lyft or the Uber, or they want a shared car program. So we're looking in Weston at the likelihood of, we'll probably do some property-owned cool cars. We'll get, a couple Mini Coopers.
Yeah.
And that if you're a resident, you can become a member, and you can use that car whenever you want. And so there's all those type of variables that come into it. But the goal of, at least the way we plan, is we try to hide the cars. We try to go with as strong a landscaping program as we can. We also try to, on our wastewater, we try to reuse as much of our water as we can. We've been working with the state on that, now you can actually treat your wastewater to the point that it is reuse quality. They allow it in the irrigation, they allow it in your secondary piping, your gray water systems. But sometimes it takes a little bit of marketing to get over that it's being used in the gray water systems. But if you actually go into a modern wastewater treatment plant today, and you take a glass from the tap, and you take a glass from the back end of the plant, the one coming off the back end of the plant looks better than the one that came out of the tap, so.
So are they generally 2 to 3 bedroom units?
No, usually the way they work out is it's a mix of 1 and 2s, and then the state requires a certain number of 3s. And that's a,
The 1.5 parking ratio makes sense if you have ones, okay.
yep. But what we'd do here is, we'd do our own, even regardless of what the requirement might be for parking, we'd do our own market study, because everything we do is driven by the value of what we produce. So if the parking really needs to be 2 for some reason, then we'll find a way to park 2.
And so your unit count would depend on the piece of property that you look to secure, and your ability to hide the building footprint from neighbors.
As best we can, yeah. There's a couple in Hamilton is kind of a unique town when you go and look at it, because most of the properties you look at, they already have deed restrictions on them, that the people of the town really embrace open space. And unless you're on a horse, I don't think you can get through most of these properties, but it seems like you can. I think one person told me you have more horses than you do residents.
No, we used to.
You used to?
I don't think that's true anymore, but it's,
We used to have one traffic light that you could only, make work if you were sitting on a horse.
Wow.
Still there, you can't,
Yeah,
you
that's
can't,
right.
you have to, the button to activate it is at about,
Is that
16
still
and-
the only traffic light?
no, there's one
There's
across
one
Windsor.
more now, yeah, right, yeah.
Dave, can you talk about other projects besides Weston that you've been involved with that are specific to 40B?
Specific to 40B, you did one in Watertown.
Yeah, 170 units in one. That was a friendly 40B, got approved. Did another one in Framingham, 180 units with Avalon. They were my partners in the deal.
I did one in Cohasset, a large one in Cohasset. That was my hometown. I'm actually looking to do one right now. Don't tell Duxbury. But I would like to buy a piece down there and do one. Looking at, I'm doing a very small project that's not a 40B in Quincy right now. That's an infill. It's just 20 units, but we do have an affordable requirement in Quincy where we have to do 2 of the units.
Right.
That again it's an unusual project, because most people who try to do little 20-unit deals never want to do a parking garage. We're doing a double parking garage under. And that way it gets the support of the town, the neighbors. I shouldn't say the town, Quincy is a city. I did one in Quincy year before last, which actually wound up being, we were bought out of it before we were even finished with our approval process, and that was the Deco. It's right at the on Bergen Parkway. We were going 12 stories. The buyers turned it into a podium plus 5 and changed it to a more contemporary looking building. We were doing more, we were following more of complementing the brick and limestone look in our plan. Other projects, I put together a program for private property down in Marshfield with Mill Creek. They just finished up the 40B process, and they're doing 257 units, I think, on that one. And I'm working right now, putting together a few more outside the city.
So, I mean, the challenge we've had is, if you've read the articles, is size, right? So we haven't been able to get anything sort of consensus. The town is multiple smaller and not one large.
Yeah, I think what, in a lot of the towns that seem to struggle with the same problem is they either get someone who comes in and solves their problem in one location, or they wind up, with 20 little deals. But the problem is, for example, if you go to Norfolk and you look at the town of Norfolk, they're dying because, not the town's doing well, but they're struggling with the fact that everybody is trying to do a for-sale 40B subdivision. So rather than following your subdivision control law, they'll do a 20-unit subdivision. Or like the problem that they were having in Weston is somebody would buy 2 acres of land and try to put 16 or 18 townhouses on it, and just try to put as much as they could in it. So that's the problem. I think but I think if the Affordable Housing Trust and the selectmen, embrace something openly in the beginning, and there's an open dialogue, and people realize what you're trying to do, and that you're not trying to build this monstrosity, that you're trying to build. Yeah, it's going to be a big building, but I'd rather have, at least me personally, I'd rather have a big, incredibly well-done building that's properly situated on a site that can be serviced well, than having, everybody without any control whatsoever doing whatever they want wherever they want. So it's a tough thing, and a lot of it is perception.
I think that you're coming to the board here at an opportune time, in that, given what happened in the fall, we're getting ready to kind of. I'm trying. My voice is gone today. I'm sorry.
You'll be able to watch now.
Sorry, but I do apologize. I came down with a little bit of laryngitis on vacation, so. But right now is a good time for you to be coming before the board, because we're trying to figure out our direction going forward. So I don't know that any of the members feel like we're ready to offer you a decision tonight, but I think that this gives us something to think about. It's different from what the town has looked at in the past, so I'm happy for that.
Well, thanks for having us. I mean, it's nice to come and have a discussion, because for us, it makes it a lot easier to say, okay, yeah, we're going to go and we're going to pursue a property. We'll try to get something under agreement. The town seems like it's a good group of people that want to figure something out. Or you run into a board that just says, there's no affordable housing ever to be created in our town, and you can call the state as much as you want. And you just walk on. You go on to another town. And
Dave, talk about how much you've had a look around town here, sort of driving around and looking, not the Google Earth view of things, but actually in your,
we looked.
probably drive a pickup truck.
We had a local realtor who did a great job at taking us around town, showing us different properties, telling us about the concerns. And he was very candid. He owns a large piece of property in this town and has a big investment. And he was very clear to us that, hey, if you do something in my town, it better be really nice, and it better be well thought out. We looked going up. This is Bay Road, and then it turns into. We looked at some parcels up off of there. We looked at the big parcel, I forget the name of the street, over on the other side of town that's behind the nursery, that Landvest had. We didn't look at it through Landvest, but a different realtor. We looked at several farms that I couldn't tell you the name of the streets off the top of my head, but they were more in neighborhoods. Although they were substantial farms, it was more concentrated than the houses, and then we started looking more back towards the center of town. Chris really feels strongly that it should be a reasonable walk, bike ride, quick drop-off of your spouse back to the center of town. So there's a couple properties that kind of fit the bill that put you so that you could make the decision to come here or go north to the other T station. But they're more out on the major drives. We didn't spend a lot of time in the neighborhoods once we saw what was there because, could we? Yeah.
Yeah, so we've seen, if you look at Maples, you would have no idea that there are 54 units there. right? And, you drive by, it looks like, you see the brick buildings, you just, properly designed, even for its age, you can disguise units en masse. Likewise, nobody coming down on Bridge Street would realize they're going through or past all those 200-unit apartment buildings that Gordon Conwell Theological Seminary has, because it's pretty much hidden. It's there. The local neighbors understand it, certainly. But I don't think so as much as good design can hide things, and I believe design can hide things if you can screen them and you have a large enough property. I don't think it's fair that the decision that the town meeting just made was only about money. We asked for them to support financially. But I think the vote was more than just about the $600,000 we were asking for. I think people, through the course of the 2 years it took us to get there, we were talking about a larger project, and then we were trying to make it smaller, and then make it smaller, and then talked about a different project. So as we went through it, we finally said, okay, what can we do between 20 and 40 units? And even then, it wasn't fully supported. So the challenge for you is to understand how you can find a site, because once you get a site, with the site comes the neighbors. And in the course of our 2 years, we said, well, what about this property? What about that property? What about that property? And we banged sticks on hornets' nests of probably 5 different neighborhoods. And these rooms were full. And so I think it's going to be a challenge for you to come up with a larger project, even if you can nicely disguise it. The challenge is yours. I mean, we do need affordable housing. We're here because we're trying to make it happen, but it's a hard. I don't think the lesson is only about money in this last town meeting.
Well, the thing for what we're looking at is some of the properties that we've looked at already have deed restrictions on them that already create incredible buffers. Yeah. So we're able to take those existing conditions and we can work with them to our benefit, so that we can put our project in such a way that, will we make it disappear? No, but can we make it so that the people that see it are proud to say, hey, go past the stone entry gate, my home's the next one on the left. Yeah. That type of thing. But I also, having dealt with a lot of towns, being a private developer, it's so much easier for us to go into a town, do something, get something down, because obviously it's our own resources. And I always feel bad for the different boards, the housing trusts, the selectmen, because you have to work through a governmental process. You have to work through a town process to get things done. And chances are many of the projects that you guys come up with, if you were a private developer, you probably could have been done before you got to your first town meeting. And that's what we're looking to do. We're looking to be able to step in and say, you know what, guys, the Affordable Housing Trust can go do other things. We're going to do something. Why don't you guys just ride shotgun and critique the hell out of what we do? And we'll get it done. And I mean, the 40B process is supposed to be a 6-month process. It doesn't happen. Yeah. It is, it's very, very expensive when they hold you up. But if we have a process and we have a town that's willing to commit and stay inside those guidelines, you can have construction and you can have happy neighbors. Because one of the big things too is most neighbors are more concerned when they have open land next to them is what's going to happen with that. It's not so much knowing that somebody's going to build apartments or somebody's going to build a luxury home or somebody's going to build a horse farm. It's the unknown that really bugs people, and it keeps them up at night, and that's what bothers them. And that's so if we can define a property, we can do something great with it, and we can do it fast. And then the other thing that goes into it is, if we do it fast, we can build it fast, so the disruption to the neighborhood is shorter. There's nothing worse than having a guy do a subdivision next to your nice house, because he'll do that subdivision one foundation at a time. He'll sell that and get that sold, and then he'll poke along to the next one. So you could literally have construction next to you for 15 to 20 years. Whereas our product and getting in and getting out, it works.
I hear you, but I think that it was a tough 2 years to come to where we ended up. And we were looking at $600,000 was the ask for town meeting so that we could get a 40-unit project not downtown and a 20-unit senior project downtown, because we have a very well-articulated need for affordable seniors. So it's not just, and that actually met so many of the criteria that we had worked on, because we didn't want one project. We wanted to keep them between 20 and 40 and not larger. And even that wasn't supported. So, I mean, it's hard to sort of say that. I mean, I don't want to speak for the board, but I suspect if we talk about it more, it's going to be hard to come to a conclusion to support something without knowing a site, without knowing, examples of, how well you design, because some people have a good idea of that they design, but maybe they don't design it that well. So there's.
I mean, I'm sure you understand what he's saying.
Oh,
You're used to this,
absolutely,
right? So-
absolutely. And it's really difficult for you guys, for us to walk in and say, we want to do 220, 240 apartments, but we're not telling you where it is. But we want your support, and we want you to wave your wand. And
I'm glad you
everything.
appreciate that.
And we totally understand that.
Nobody, we've had, I guess, resistance for larger projects. You make some good points. I mean, if you could build 150 units in a downtown location that's still only 4 stories tall, and the car parking is contained, and it's near the train station, and it's for, directed at people who may not even have cars, that makes some sense. So, and I think that transit-oriented development, whatever you want to call it, but
Right.
it makes some sense, and I think that, you're the expert at, maybe doing that kind of thing.
I agree. That's why I kind of said to him, it has to be near the train station. That will make, it
So-
eliminates the argument of all the traffic and all the.
Can I ask, in your mind as the developer, what do you think is near the train station?
It means as far as.
Yeah, what's proximate enough for you to be interested?
So we have, near our train station, within a half mile, there are not a lot of parcels that it,
59 Willow Street.
well, they're, like I
That's
said,
only 1 acre.
Not a
so
lot of parcels,
got a
but we,
lot on that.
Well,
we also have a very high water table.
it's 1 acre, right?
Yeah, but most importantly, in most of our downtown, we have a very high water table. So your ability to go down and create a parking level is going to be a deep engineering challenge without pushing water onto adjacent sites. So, I mean,
Willow Street, tails off.
yeah, but on a larger site, you have flexibility to bury it. Downtown, you'll have less
Put
flexibility.
it this way, if you told us we had to build, the equivalent of a swimming pool to put the building in the downtown, and you had a piece of property that fit the bill, you have 1 acre, maybe we should come back tomorrow. Because, I mean, it's the sites, you have challenges. When you have a site that's 1 acre and you're using that whole footprint, you got 1 acre of problems. If you're doing a 20-acre site and you got buildings spread out all over it, your soil's testing till the cows come home, or the horses in town, and you got to find out where your problems are, and you don't know where they are. So I personally would rather stay on a small footprint. The western site that we're doing is 2.1 acres. We're only touching 1.7 of it. And the neat part about it is it's right smack up against 128. And that's why so many people embraced it. There's a development team across the street that's trying to do something, and they're trying to do 345 units, but they're impacting all kinds of acreage and all kinds of abutters. And the key is, if we can find a piece that's within a reasonable walk to the train, would love to grab an acre downtown if you had it right by the train station. But if we have to go outside and up the road a little bit, so long as we can get a reasonable walk back to town, it works. And it's just a matter of trying to limit the number of neighbors. So if you have one abutter and maybe the rest of it is all pasture.
Yeah. So, we've gone through this exercise, as Mark has said, over the past 2 years plus. looking at town-owned property. We've looked at deals that are private deals, as an example. And if I'm looking at the train station and kind of draw a circle around it about a half mile,
Yeah, half of it's in Wenham.
half of it's in good point.
We did look at one that was half in Wenham, half in
Yeah, we know
Hamilton.
the property, actually. And then the reality is, the pickings are slim, really slim.
We have seen two good properties that are as close as we think we can get to town. Few neighbors, and the location and the vistas and everything are great. And we'd like to pursue it, but we'd like to pursue it with confidence that if we come back to this board or we come back to the selectmen and say, hey, we truly want to do a friendly 40B here.
The best thing I can say is this, like in Weston, we didn't have the people opposing us. We had no neighbors, no citizens, not one. Across the street from me, Boston Properties, was trying to, it took them 8 years to build Biogen and Monster. And now and they put a restriction on the property, it took them 8 years to get it approved. Now Boston Properties comes back and asked them to build 200 and some units and put a 175,000 square foot office building.
More.
Plus a parking garage. You know, you got all these neighbors surrounding it. So the whole town, and for it to get approved, the town has to approve it, they have to take a vote. Well, the whole town has signs everywhere. No, one sign against my project, but that didn't work to the benefit of the selectmen. What I got, and believe me, if I had people opposed to me, I wouldn't have did the project. Because it's an endless battle.
Right.
And that's what I'm trying to lead up to. I don't want to be in an endless battle with neighbors and upset them and all this other stuff. I'm not looking for a fight, you know, and I did that with Weston, and it's just like, all my other projects were all been, you know, small units, 40 units, 60 units, I've done all those, all friendly, all, you know, I'm not gonna sit there and waste my money. I did waste a lot of money in Weston, but I hope I prevail at the appeals court. We'll see. I mean, what they found, they appealed me on, they declined me on, is a state road. They said I was in the
Aquifer.
Not even near it. What was the other thing?
Wastewater, which is with the state, it's not in their jurisdiction.
All three things are with the state, and that's what a 40B is all about. So it was just a bunch of baloney, just to delay me and cost me money. So I hope I prevail in the end. We'll see.
And that's why we're trying to be as upfront with, and go to towns, and I was amazed when you called me back. Because credit to you, most town managers won't even return a phone call.
Well, I'm in the unenviable position of actually being a voting member of this board currently. Situation we hope to rectify in the not-too-distant future, but that's beside the point.
Next item on the bylaw.
Yeah.
Get some information on your other projects.
Sure.
They approved our project, but they wouldn't approve Boston Properties project.
But as far as different projects we do, and I'm glad to get you information on that.
Great to get some information.
That would be helpful.
Yeah.
You know,
And if you want, could I get a straw vote if it's worthwhile for us to try to put a piece of property under agreement?
What would we be voting on?
It's a straw vote of support.
I don't want to put you in that.
So we're not the zoning.
I know that. I know that.
Yeah.
I know that, but you're a good read of the town.
So what we do know,
Can I ask just one question?
Sure.
I want to get a clear answer on this one, and it's
Dave.
related-
Dave, can you
Can you
speak?
come up to the podium?
It's televised, so
It's very simple. I just want a clear answer, and Mark has addressed it and Bill has addressed it. We have talked about affordable housing in Hamilton for years now. We've really not made much progress. We need about 200 units. You keep talking about 200 units, but as a town, we have talked about 20 to 40. If we had a site that would be appropriate for 40 units, would you be interested?
Yes.
Okay. Because I see a major problem here with, the inertia that's been built behind the 20 to 40 unit criteria, and you seem to be pretty entrenched in the 200. I just want to know how hard a line that is for you. And I understand your position. I understand your position that it's much more efficient to do it the way you're talking about, but
Well, when we get to what we're looking at is if we do a large project, 200 units, it would be all rental. I think what happens is when you get back into smaller projects, they become a for sale product.
No. So that, let's, real clear here in town, excluding what just went on with Habitat, we are 100% looking at rentals here in town.
So, and
Would we look at a small rental, Mike?
I'd look at a 40 unit, but we have to look at the price of the property and,
And it's got to make sense.
so, to be,
still perform on.
yeah, so I just want to be clear. So the town is not a developer on this. So Russ is correct in saying that we prefer a rental because of the price points that it achieves, and you get full credit for it. Because we only have single-family zoning. The only way you can do something is a 40B. It's the only way you can get any density whatsoever. So we're going to have 40B. You might as well do it rental. You get 100% credit for all of them. But it's not. We're not trying to develop. It's like other people have come to us and we've said
we're not
we're more
developers.
excited about a rental than a for sale.
Right, right. And in fact, there is a small development in town, which years and years ago was for sale, Ricker Circle, and those were for sale, single-family homes, and that's coming off our count in 2020, I think, or 21.
A year and a half. Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah.
So that's about, where the sale things come in. So the rental is I think, what we've been discussing.
We're more, I've done all rental, I haven't done for sale.
Yeah.
But Dave asked a very good question, whether or not you could operate at a level that's at a smaller total project size.
I've done them, I've done many of them.
And you're doing one in Quincy now, Dave, did you say?
We did that one. That was 180.
That was a big project, but I've done 40 and 60, I've done 80.
And
One in Waltham, one in Watertown.
I mean, we would certainly look at it.
Because if it made financial sense, I would do it.
would you sell those on as well, or would you keep those?
That's a decision I have to make after do the farm and everything. Because if it's a good cap return, I'd probably keep it and build it.
Jack?
I just wanted to clarify one point. On your Weston development, you talked about 2.1 acres and it was 150 units.
Correct.
Is Weston sewered?
No.
No.
So you were going to be, on the 2.81 acres, you were going to be able to take care of the sewer situation as well? Sorry?
We have an approval.
Is it a good condition there? Generally, a lot of that were terrible.
If you, Jack, just keep the conversations to the microphone, yeah.
Hello, Doug?
Yes, I just wanted to point out that we can probably solve with projects less the aesthetic and environmental issues. But to me, the number one issue of cost is the cost of the town of school costs. So when you talk about projects coming in and you build 100 and some units, if you put 100 kids in our school system, it's going to add $1.8 million to our yearly town budget, all on Hamilton's account. This is why I think the important distinction about these projects is the family housing, that the state requires that we do a 50-50 split, as you saw with Willow Street. Harbor Lights needed a companion project, a family housing, to let the state, approve it. And so, to me, the important issues are we talking about 80% AMI or something like Andrew was talking about, a 60 or below? Are we talking about then how the family housing component affecting the school costs?
So
I think
can you,
Can I just try real quick?
Let me clarify, I want to
sorry.
clarify one thing, the 50-50, what are you talking about there?
That's the state's mandate, is that your family housing has to be 50% of your required SHI. You can do age-restricted housing, and that doesn't affect the school population, and many towns would favor to do it all, age-restricted housing, but the state says, wait, we have to have half of this as family housing.
I believe that has more to do with when the state is putting in subsidy and is helping to underwrite the project. When it's a private side 40B development, the restrictions are different. And additionally, the 40B requirements would only be on the affordable units. So, for instance, if they built, if they built 200 units, with 25% of them are affordable.
Right.
Even if the 50-50 that you talk about comes into play, it's only on 25 of the units. The other 25 affordable units wouldn't have to be family housing, and the other 150 units wouldn't be affordable, it would be market rate anyway. That's why, in one aspect, their proposal to do 1 and 2 bedrooms limits the number of kids that you're going to have in the building right away, because the 1 bedrooms aren't going to have any kids.
But they still have to get the 25% qualification on family housing.
No, they have to get 25% of the total number of units have to be affordable, of which,
25% of that.
right,
Family. That's the 3-bedroom units he was talking about earlier.
right.
2 to
So-
3, yeah.
So
Doug, may I
the
ask-
numbers go way down when you work with a private side developer taking on their own risk in their own project, which is one of the reasons that I'm actually happy that they're here now when we're relooking at all of these things, because this is, to my knowledge, something that the town hadn't focused on in the past, and it's just a different thing to consider, because
Good point.
more risk goes on them, unfortunately, guys, than on us as a town or a board. And it still allows us to continue to look for ways to solve the affordable housing problem in town without creating a burden on the school district or without creating a political hot potato for this board or the select board.
So, I just wanted to ask Doug a question before he leaves. So you made a distinction between 60% and 80% AMI, and I was wondering what you really meant by that, or what you were driving at, because
Harbor Light's proposal has always been under 60% of AMI.
Yeah.
Anything that's what their mandate is to do.
yeah.
Well, but that's because Harbor Lights is an affordable housing developer only, and their goal, their mission, they're a nonprofit, their mission is to create affordable housing for low income. So that's a self-imposed goal of theirs and their board, 60% AMI.
Well,
It's not a requirement of the state.
Joe, Andrew has pointed out that the point of that is also that gives them their funding source.
Right.
If you go in with just under 80%, you're not on the priority list for funding. If you go in for under 60, then he gets moved way up on the funding list.
You're absolutely right, but they're not looking for funding from us or the state. They're privately financed, so they don't need to meet those thresholds to get the state approval.
But even accepting that, what do you think the consequences of 80% or 60% AMI is? Or how does it come into this conversation?
Well, it has to do with demographics. I don't think there's any mystery about that. You know, I mean, we have a pretty high, AMI in Hamilton, and 80% of it allows for a pretty broad demographics to qualify for be under the 80%. If you talk about the project that Habitat is doing, if it goes on the tax rolls at $800,000, it brings in about $12,000 a year in taxes, of which 2/3 goes to the school, $8,000. So if those two houses put one kid in the school system at $18,000, the town goes backwards by $10,000 a year. This is why I think that I preached to the Finance Committee in this kind of discussion that they should be concerned most about this issue long-term. This is what could sink the town budget of the town of Hamilton.
I'm still having problem. The implication is that 60% AMI has a different kid calculation than an 80% AMI, and therefore is a more negative cost consequence. I think that was the point you were trying to make, and I was like,
And it's tangential in a lot of ways, because it's not anything that we could solve with a vote here, so.
right.
And it's not the way, and it's not your business model.
Oh, sorry, the microphone.
Sorry, Dave, thank you.
We're required our affordable to be at 80% of median income. The gentleman raises a great concern, a great question about kids coming to the schools, et cetera. We've run that almost in every single town we've been in. It's always a concern. The school committee always shows up and raises that concern. But when you get into the studies and you look at Massachusetts and you look at most of the towns, your enrollments, your class sizes right now probably at all-time lows. The apartment buildings do not bring at least the type of product that we design and develop. It's not really designed for somebody to move in with 4 or 5 kids. It's meant for young couples or seniors. And we don't age restrict our product. We do it by design. The fact that there's parking underneath. A senior wants to be in that building versus a surface parked. So that's the way you get around it. There's a lot of things you can do. But he raises a absolute super question. But when you get into the studies and you look at it, and I believe Mass Housing, DHCD, they all have reports that the kids just don't come to the schools. The numbers aren't there. We had that argument in Weston because Weston is, I don't know what number they were, or say they were number 4 in the state. And that argument came up. Well, Lexington's number 1, and they're next door. So why would you rent in Weston when if you're truly about getting your kid in the best school, you'd rent next door. So, good question, but
Have you ever been asked to provide any sort of impact fee to the town, give something back to the town?
Excuse me?
Have you ever been asked to do any sort of impact fee or impact reimbursement to the town, build a park, donate something to the town, but get something back in terms of, you're gonna be bringing 200 people to town, so, 200 units, so what? That was a question the last developer was asked, like, what are you gonna do for the town? We're gonna give you the land, we're gonna let you build it.
out on the first
What are you
date.
gonna
By the
do?
way, he's a selectman, so he's
I mean,
Obviously, if it's in the budget, yes, absolutely.
there's always a mitigation ask. The best thing we can tell you, and the best thing we can do, is you don't get unless you ask. Is the best thing we can do is bring you tax revenues, so you can afford to do all these things on your own, and to bring you a high quality building, which will bring you, will make the people of the town happy.
We're not gonna build a cheap place, it doesn't benefit.
Yeah.
Rents
But
I'd be
Thank you
interested
for
in,
asking, Bill.
I'd be interested in discussing with you guys too, how to expand your radius out from the town center, from the train station. I mean, how we could get you to maybe, I think the landscape of options changes a little bit when you get from a half mile to, between a half mile and a mile.
that's reasonable.
And I think that that's something we should continue to talk about.
we looked at that, we were actually talking about it, Carl, on the way up. And when we run into that type of situation, then all of a sudden you get into, okay, let's do a shuttle service. You can, so that people don't leave, they leave the car at the house and they grab the shuttle service.
Well, so if I would say too, that if you don't mind, one of the things that when you talk about, access to transit, right? A lot of times the transit planners talk about last mile, because there's, public transit has designated stops, and the difficulty is closing the last mile between where the train or the bus stops and where the person lives. If you guys are open to helping us do some things like improve bike lanes so that it sounds like the people you'd be marketing to, who don't want the cars and such, may want to live in a place like Hamilton with its big open spaces, might be willing and even interested in using a bike on, to get to the transit station. So if we start to talk around, yeah.
An exercise set outside,
Yep.
because this property was right on Charles River.
So if we
Created a,
if we could talk about creative solutions as far as closing that last mile transit gap for us and you, then maybe you get to stay in your same kind of market demo, and help us build a better bike lane to get from wherever this location a mile out instead of a half mile out is. And instead of walking, we're talking about encouraging your tenants to bike as well.
And kayaks in the spring?
Joe, in our biggest fight, as far as when it comes to neighbors or whatever, the people in the town, is that traffic is usually
Yep.
the biggest issue.
Yep.
That's why in Weston, literally, you drive out the door, driveway, you're on
Yep.
128.
Absolutely.
Not even.
I understand.
So boundary projects are always easier, right? Because
Screen,
the
they
the
screen
flows
it,
and the traffic
and they screen
don't
and they,
travel around, yeah.
One of the properties we did look at is if you took the divider between stations, it's just a hair closer to the, one up in Ipswich, is it? And so people will turn right rather than left.
You win yourself some friends with that argument.
It all depends upon where the best coffee is.
Yeah.
That's a completely different criteria.
Do you guys have more questions for these
No,
guys? or-
I thank you for coming in.
yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
No, I appreciate you coming in.
Yeah.
Dave, I'm sure we'll be in touch again.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, George, you can follow up with them on getting some information.
Yeah, I think I have their email, right?
I copied you on an email to them, and I have Dave's card still downstairs, so.
Okay.
So I might reach out to them and just give them an
thank
idea
you.
of what we went through over the last 2 years. Just so,
Got a good team, Stantec.
It's a different approach.
the right team.
Well, and this, I understand your concerns
Yeah.
about with what you've just gone through the last 2.5 years. I can't even imagine having gone through that and then being asked to start all over again. So I feel bad,
to
but I just want to have
To be
us
fair-
have different things to look at.
Yeah.
Yeah.
sensible, 100%
Yep.
sensible.
Yep.
So,
I didn't mean to cut you off, Mark.
It's all good.
next item on the agenda, item number 5, is discussion of amending the town bylaw creating the Hamilton Affordable Housing Trust. We had some discussion last meeting about the structure of the trust, and how it was formed. So, last time, we had some discussion, and I had looked at neighboring towns and how they have assembled their affordable housing trusts. So I went and looked, again, today, at Danvers, Ipswich, I looked at Wenham, then I came back to us. So, one of the things that was mentioned last time around, last meeting, was the discussion about having our town manager on the Affordable Housing Trust. And there had been some previous conversations some time ago about, does it really make sense or not? So I want to reiterate what the 3 other communities do right nearby. So in Danvers, they were created in 2011. On their 7-member board, they have 1 member of the Board of Selectmen. That's it. In Ipswich, it's a 5-member board. They were created in 2012, and they have 1 member of the Board of Selectmen. Let me go backwards for a minute here. In the town of Danvers, there's a requirement that members need to be residents. In Ipswich, same thing, they need to be residents. So in Wenham, they were created in 2009. They have members ranging from a minimum of 5 up to 7 members. They have to be residents, and there is 1 Board of Selectmen member. In Hamilton, which sort of the earlier iteration of the Hamilton Affordable Housing Trust was created in 1972. 5 members, 1 BOS member, and the town manager is part of that 5. And there's no residency requirement mentioned in the bylaw.
So I'm going to abstain from discussion on this, as some people might presume that this could benefit me one way or shape or form. So I will just allow you all to decide what you would like to do.
I'm a little torn, so you're good at being on the board, right? So you're making some good suggestions. You've got insights that we may not have. You're hearing and seeing things that we don't know. Dora's another good asset that way. Politically, I think some of the things you're mentioning make a lot of sense, right? So, people who vote on what happens to the town should be residents, right? So, anyway, that's my 2 cents.
So Robin was also brought a lot of really good, as a town manager, she had, a lot of, in her short time with us, she was very helpful.
Really insightful.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So that's what I'm getting. I think that the town manager type role, maybe it's unfair to the town manager to make him go to all these meetings, but, they seem to bring something to the meeting, though, when they're here.
Yeah.
I think it's 2 things, being part of it or being a vote. You come to the Board of Selectmen, but you don't vote. So it's, do you come and not vote? So I think it's the 2, I think the input, the insight is important. The voting is what is a little awkward, because you're not a resident of town, so it's not really going to affect you like it's going to affect a resident, so.
I think the most awkward thing is, in this role, once we as a board decide to do something, we kind of have an obligation to advocate for it, because we're saying, hey, town, vote this way. This is how we want support, financial support, we want political support, whatever it is. Once we come to a conclusion, we want it to be supported. And yet, he's in an awkward, town manager.
You can't.
He or she is in an awkward position because they're trying to be more neutral in how they manage everything. So it's a very awkward spot for town manager. I get it.
So is the town manager always neutral, or if they believe something's the right thing to do for the town, they should say that?
I really don't want to participate in the discussion. My role in the town government structure is to be the chief administrative officer of the town and implement what the town meeting and the Board of Selectmen, vote on and prescribe as the policy and the direction that they want to see the town follow. My role is to be the, professional with experience in getting that stuff done. And, especially walking in the door in
It's not
September.
advisory and it's not really meant to be advisory?
From an administrative point of view, not from
I can,
fiscal, I mean, it's
I can,
not really.
I can advise, if they want to do a policy that I know is against the state's general laws, I would sit in a Board of Selectmen meeting and say, guys, you can't do that. If what you want to accomplish is X, then let's try to find another way to accomplish that without doing this. And I could still do that in an advisory role to your board without being a voting member on the board. But I do think that there's an inherent conflict for anybody sitting in
North
that
Shore
position.
Consortium, you seem to know those guys, that's something that we might be able to leverage. Yeah, again, you don't have to vote in order to do that, or help us do that.
Or what do you think?
What do I think? Whatever you guys want is fine with me.
He's doing the administrative thing.
So what if we were to look at the composition of the board, and
Can you throw quorum in there as well? Because I think a quorum of 4 out of 5 just doesn't make sense.
so that's what it is presently in Hamilton. 4 or 5 makes
The
a
other,
quorum.
did the other towns have that in there?
They do. So what if we were to look at the number 5, which is our number of members, but make it a range like Wenham, 5 to 7. They happen to have 7 members presently. Do they always have it? I don't know, but that's what they have. And their town manager is not part of the 7. So I've not sat in a meeting next
It
door.
has to be 5 or 7.
A minimum of 5, not to exceed 7.
Yeah, but how do you do 6, and how do you vote? Who's the tiebreaker?
Reduce the quorum to 3 if there's 5?
Yeah, you would. So the problem, our larger boards, of which really, at this point, we just have the planning
Planning
board.
board, yeah, it's like 9.
It gets to be very, it's not an easy conversation to have, and it's hard to keep things moving and focused, and not everybody does their homework. So you don't have consistent quality, I think, historically over the 7.
Right.
And I think our bucket, is much smaller, more narrow than theirs. Planning board, you're dealing with special permits, you're dealing with, A&Rs, you're dealing with policy, you're doing master plan, you're dealing with a much broader range of issues, and having a broader group of people seems to at least be an excuse to do it. You also have the special permits where you have a super majority, so you need to have more of a commitment to it. We don't have a supermajority component to it, so I'd hesitate requiring 7. I mean, if you guys wanted 7, that's fine. I think 5 is plenty to have a good dialogue.
Yeah, I would agree. I think 5 is the right size, quorum of 3, and I think that it should be 5 residents, is my opinion.
5 residents, and have the town manager in an advisory capacity.
With a Board of Selectmen member still.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's,
Eventually, we're gonna need Board of Selectmen support for anything.
I think it's consistent. You said, I think it was on every board that you saw, it was a
A BOS member.
BOS member.
Yeah. Now, I did look at cities, but I only stuck with towns.
What's the
thinking that
process
this
for
was-
changing this? What's the, if we?
In this case, it would just be town meeting.
A town meeting vote, it's the composition of the Affordable Housing Trust, according to Donna and Bill Shields, and Bill Shields was right, is comprised in a general bylaw in the town's books. So an amendment of the general bylaw would be required. It wouldn't require a zoning change, which would require 2/3 majority. A simple majority would help an amendment to the bylaw.
Does anybody here left have an opinion of our discussion, since it's gonna be a town meeting vote?
You want to get me off this board too? I knew I liked you, Dave.
No, I don't, Bill. I just think you probably have better things to do. And I think my personal reaction, I think the residency requirement is one that rings for me. I think the board should be 5. I think it should be all residents, and it should not include the town manager.
As long as you're not asking for a residency requirement for the town manager, I'm fine.
You could argue that some of when Robin came in and had some very, sharp things, because she wasn't a resident and she wasn't even a long-term town manager, she had a very unique lens. She could come in and recommend something that was a little bit perhaps more harsh, which was welcome in the language of what we were dealing with. But, you know, maybe if she was a resident, or if she was a long-term town manager, we wouldn't have gotten the same advice.
Yeah, maybe so. You know, I think this, the advice was more candid, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which was really great. So if we could make a candid advisory role for the town manager.
He'd like that, I bet.
I don't mind candor.
Candor's good, candor's good. So so it sounds like there's some agreement to residents, 5 members, and having the town manager.
And 3.
And a quorum of 3.
A quorum of 3. Does that all make sense,
And
I think?
you could even request, I mean, I'm not suggesting this, but you could even request that the town manager be kind of an ex officio member, not a voting member, but somebody that is supposed to be at the meetings as much as possible and, you know, participate in the discussions, but not be
Right, I
a
think
voting
that's good.
member.
And it's kind of a 6, gives you 6
Yeah.
for discussion, which is, I think that's good. However that needs to be written, I think that's a good recommendation.
So the process, I guess, would be to ask Donna to come up with a draft?
I was going to propose that we ask Dor to hatch together a draft through
my research.
from some of our neighbors existing, because then we'd have Donna review it. I'd work with you on it, Dor. I'm not going to throw it all
Also,
to
the
you.
other thing is the enabling legislation. All of these are allowed by the enabling legislation.
All of these changes, so.
All the changes.
So
Yeah.
we don't really have to do that much other than propose some amendments to our existing
Yeah.
adopted bylaw. So
Yeah.
Dora and I could probably haggle through something and then run it by Donna. I think it's far cheaper to have her review something than to actually
Right, yeah.
initiate it.
Sure.
Okay.
Trying to keep my eye on the bottom line. I know there's a lot of folks that want me to do that, so.
So could we see that happens?
Yeah.
Do we need to, we don't, at this point,
Like a motion?
a motion or anything like that?
Did we
or-
make a motion last time? Or did we just discuss it?
Just discussed.
All right, so make a motion. You have it down, or?
So I would make a motion that we, as discussed, we would have a look at revising the composition of this board,
We're proposing that we revise it, right? It's more demonstrative than. or
that
whatever
that
is.
we do revise the board to be 5 members, 5 residential members, and that the town manager would still participate as a non-voting member in an advisory
Capacity.
capacity,
Yeah.
and that the quorum number would go from 4 to 3.
Right. Is that it?
Sounds good.
I second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
I'm going to abstain only, as I said, because
Got it.
people might think that this benefits me one way or another, so I just.
Thanks for hearing that through.
yeah.
So other business, I've had some thoughts about where we are, and tonight's listening to Dave puts a little more thought in my head about it, but, you know, it may be time to ask a consultant to come in and help us and figure out and maybe further guide us with the process of trying to figure out the 40B situation. So what comes to mind specifically, as everybody is probably aware, I'm on the Gordon Conwell Task Force, and we're looking at, and we've had some discussion with those folks up on the Hill about the housing component up there being underutilized, and the possibility of some of that housing becoming 40B restricted housing. This is an example of. We've had a tour. We've had some very meaningful discussion, I would say, and I would say that we're hearing some positive feedback about the possibility of that happening. It'd be good to reach out, in my opinion, it would be good to reach out to an expert or somebody with more experience than we all have, with the idea of picking somebody's brain to find out if this actually makes a whole lot of sense or not.
I think there's a twist to it, right? That the housing has to be somehow, I don't know how disassociated it needs to be from the school. So it has to at least not be restricted to students.
It would go to the lottery.
it would have to go to, and then I don't know if they'd have to start paying taxes on those units as if they're just residential units, and, there's like a whole fuzziness around.
Right, and that's some of the questions, Bill, about, is it way too complicated? Does it not make sense
I think it makes perfect sense for us.
to look at it?
I mean, we get 40 units up there or 20 units up there.
Yeah,
it's
you,
not like
you
that.
get units without creating new anything.
Yeah, no,
Yeah,
it's-
you just don't,
Would grad students qualify if they happen to live in those units? There's
Yeah.
little gray areas.
that's not a gray area. I mean, you have, affordable housing has to meet affirmative
No, you make
marketing.
it open to everyone, and a grad student happens to live there.
And,
Yeah.
but his
Yeah.
income is less than $6,000 a year, he's fine.
So the way,
No, it doesn't even have to qualify. It's if you do a 40B thing, then you have any 25% and 75%
get-
and the whole.
Right.
yeah.
Right. So.
So the way, the lotteries are a little bit funny. The initial lottery in an affordable project creates a bucket of candidates, and they don't really go away. Once, after, at year 2 or year 3, the people that put their names in the initial lottery are still there. They just are, they've got more of a waiting list. They don't have, so you have your lottery, you have 100 people, 10 people are chosen, you have 90 left, you have more people apply over time, so the pool gets larger or smaller, but you then choose from among the people that are interested in that.
Only, but I guess the weirdness, that's only the affordable component.
That's right.
So if they had 20 units and you had 25% affordable, you still got 15 units that could be made available to anybody.
So one of the concerns are that they might be renting out.
25% affordable.
Yeah.
Mr. Math.
But you're right,
It's like.
where you're going with that.
Yeah, so without getting too into it, if there's a revenue piece to it, then that's not part of the initial permit that they have. So the point that it's a grayer area and you need to articulate all the topics before you actually negotiate something are great. I don't know if it's a 40B consultant to help you with that. If you want a consultant or you want tactical advice as to what the pieces are, that's a completely different issue than someone who's a 40B consultant who can, because we as a body are not even in the 40B chain. The planning board has
Right.
its 40B policy, which they're not even in the chain, but they've put themselves in the chain by having a 40B policy, and the ZBA is the one invoking it. So, I mean, I don't think we want to have another layer.
We want to know what we can do to make units eligible under 40B to help
That's it.
resolve the issue.
So
as well. That part, and
Yeah.
that's a little twist to the whole thing.
That's spot on. So it could be a function of a consultant that is an expert in planning, but also has a lot of exposure to 40B. I mean, it's gonna be, it's pretty broad, but
So
it's
what I-
highly specialized.
What I've found is that there are almost no consultants who consult to the towns to advise them on how they can use the 40B law more effectually towards the goals of the town, or like circumvent the law, or like avoid spending money on affordable, like those kinds of issues that we struggle with. There are plenty that advise not-for-profits on how to use it, and for-profit
Maximize,
developers. But it's an odd thing, right? So because we're looking to say, how can we take this law that's meant to have us do this and do maybe something as close to that as we need to, but not go overboard? And that's kind of an odd way to look at it, right?
David?
Okay, I'm David Smith. I'm chairman of the Gordon Conwell Theological Seminary Task Force. That's a mouthful. That the town has charged with the job of trying to see how the seminary might compensate the town in non-monetary ways for what it costs us to educate the children of their students. In a nutshell, that's it. I'm interested to hear this conversation because we, as a task force, have struggled with this. We've chewed on it. We've tried to look at all the different angles. And I think ultimately what we have figured is that we really just don't know enough to figure out whether it's whether it's legally feasible. Is you kind of nailed the question. And is there an expert who might help us answer that question? On the flip side, of course, we have yet to really, Joe has met with, I'll call it his counterpart at the seminary, but we as a task force have really not met with any people that might be counterparts to us and would help answer questions we have about what the seminary has to offer that might offer compensation in some way other than monetary. So, but I think all of us on the task force are convinced that if all we do is just kind of go to the seminary and say, hey, we have this idea, what do you think of it? I can't conceive that it would go anywhere. I think what we have to try to do is find the right expert to help us answer the question, is such an idea, is it legally feasible? Can we legally get credit for what we're thinking of doing if the seminary would allow us to do it in the first place? So is it legally feasible? I think that's probably the first question. And then how could we structure a package to present to the seminary that would attract their interest in allowing us to do it if it's legal, and all those related follow-on questions. The task force has no budget. It's strictly a voluntary effort. And Russ has suggested that perhaps this Affordable Housing Trust might be able to carve out a little bit of money to hire a consultant to help us get over that first hurdle of whether this is even legally feasible or not. And then, you go off in either the direction, no, it's not feasible, just abandon hope for that possibility, or yes, it is, here's how it could be legally feasible, and then how could we structure some kind of a package to present to the seminary to try to talk them into accepting it.
Yeah, so I know a few attorneys that dabble in affordable housing, and they must be more familiar than most on these sorts of issues. So I guess maybe we can talk to them and see if they have any interest in trying to advise us.
Okay. So what I'd like to commend to this trust another job, which would be trying to identify candidates that could help us answer this question, which is very highly specialized. And there may be only one or two people in the Commonwealth who have that kind of expertise. But I'm hoping one of you or some of you can tackle that job of coming up with a couple of candidates, and perhaps you would interview them and then select someone that you would task with carrying out this feasibility. I'll call it a legal feasibility study, for lack of a better term. So I'd like to I want to highly recommend the trust undertake that.
Sure.
So if the task force can articulate the questions I suspect in multiple permutations, right? Because it will just be, maybe this, maybe A, maybe A1, maybe A2, A3, maybe B.
It's hard to express it in one sentence.
That's right. So, but
You'll
the
get
more
led by the attorney, I think. If you present him with the basic facts we threw out here, they'll start saying, well, don't think about that. You'll have to do something like
All right.
that.
The task force will create, let's call it a one-page summary document of the situation and the questions, and then the trust could take that and.
So the most free, most expert advice is to jump on the MBTA and show up at DHCD downtown and speak to someone there and have them knock off, no, maybe, yes, no. So great. So yeah, at a very cheap cost, you're focused on the things that are, because they'll probably have opinions.
Pardon?
Are they the ones who declare whether something qualifies or not?
Yep.
But they also might be the ones determining whether or not this has to follow a lottery, whether or not, fair market housing, what standards apply, can someone use the property that's proved if it's not fair market housing?
Would these units get some sort of funding from the town or the state or something to?
What we've kind of, well, here, again, it's one of these things like it's, you know, a Russian doll. You start taking, you peel the onion, and it just gets more and more complicated. But one question begets another. So, yes. I guess it would come down to a matter of first, would the seminary be willing to carve out, let's say, a building of apartments?
It would be, my sense is a building would be better than.
Absolutely.
scattered units or something.
I wouldn't even want to think of scattering it around. Would they be willing to carve out a building? And then, how would you structure the ownership and management of that entity? And some on our task force have suggested that the Hamilton Housing Authority would probably be the logical entity to take responsibility for developing the product, to use the earlier terminology we heard here.
Right now, they're not units, or do you have apartments?
They're apartments.
They're apartments
They're
in,
apartments.
yeah,
Maybe.
Central hallway.
Okay.
Right.
yeah.
So I think that's a great idea.
Yeah.
The housing authority might make them qualify instantly.
And we understand that they may have the capacity to be able to handle something like this.
That's correct.
So,
Bill, this could work out well for the seminary as well, because they have 211 units over there, which are grossly underutilized. Vacancy rates are high. They're in individual buildings, which are somewhat geographically isolated, and could be parsed off in some way to create affordable housing. Doug's done some work on this, and maybe, Doug, you'd like to verbalize a little bit about what you've heard.
Are we on TV?
Yeah, so you
Yeah,
have to
we're
do
on
it from the
TV,
microphone, so anybody can.
but again, remember, what we don't know is this even legally feasible? So a lot of this discussion could be just moot, because it isn't legally feasible. So we really have to try to get the answer to that question first, and I've gotten some good suggestions here already that help answer that.
I'd say that I commend, that we formed this task force only a couple months ago, so I think this is a great start. I look to Joe, because the task force really reports, I think, to the town manager.
Yeah, ultimately, they'll report.
So in
to me.
terms of funding sources and consultants, is this the right process? Is it come to selectmen, does it come to you, or does it come to?
That they have a request that would potentially need funding, and that they're looking for alternative ways to fund it,
Right.
I'm happy with.
Oh, it's good, right? I just want to make
it's-
sure we're doing the right
it's-
process.
Yeah, I think that it's.
But the simple numbers are, there's 92 2- and 3-bedroom units up there. If they would separate off 23 units, 25%, and agree to do it as a separate building under the lottery, that would get all 92 units of family housing on the Hamilton SHI.
That might be
Well,
an impressive.
It would
thought.
almost wipe out our total need for
Yeah.
family housing.
I
And
caution that might be a little
moreover-
aggressive.
So
Doug,
the-
I'm sorry to interrupt. I just think that, in separating out the units and putting the management and care of a certain segment of the units under a different entity, it may create the state looking at them as separate entities. In other words, they may only give us credit for the 23, not the whole 92.
Something to be
Just
discovered.
something to be discovered. I think
This
I
is
just
why
want
we
to be
need
clear
an
about that.
expert.
Right, absolutely.
There's one of the big
Well, I think
questions, so I
student
don't know.
student housing is
But
is
the second
specifically exempt.
component,
It is.
to me, is we're already paying the $800,000 a year for the school children coming out of those units. So it wouldn't put a new component
Right.
into our school
Well,
costs.
it's a good solution. We've got to see what.
It's a good thing to pursue and look into. As I mentioned at the Gordon Conwell Task Force meeting, I appreciate the thought that's gone into it, and
Yeah, no,
I want us to chase it down.
so-
At the same time, not to be the bearer of bad news, but yes, we are already paying for the education of those students, and that is not something the state generally cares about. That's their view is that the 40B law is set up to create more affordable housing, not give you credit for stuff that already doesn't qualify. So
if it's sitting
I just
fallow-
want us all to be, I want to chase it down as much as everybody else. I just want us,
If it's sitting fallow and
be-
we put it to use, that's another.
that's a good thing.
Right,
And I think
exactly
that's a good way to frame it.
Yeah.
Dave?
Yeah, so anyway, we talked about this quite a bit at,
I have a hard deadline to get back at 8 o'clock.
Yeah, I need to
I have the
take
action
a-
item.
so.
That our task force will get to you a document that you can use to mush around however you'd like, but to
Great.
use to get in the hands of candidates for the kind of a legal opinion that we think we need.
Thank you, David.
Thank you.
Thank you, David.
Thank you for coming.
Can you send that to me also?
Yes, of course.
Russ, what's your
Okay.
email?
RLT 34. Oh, this is on TV. S.
All right, you
What's
can
your
tell me
password?
at yahoo.com.
34S. Okay, I got you here.
All right, thanks. David?
Okay, so I think you understand the general picture, but we talked about this a lot at the task force, and Doug verbalized some of his thoughts, and we hashed it around quite a bit, and it seemed like it made make a lot of sense. Jack came up with a consultant who apparently has addressed the Affordable Housing Trust in the past, Mr. Ted Carmen. I don't know if anybody on the
Go ahead.
Yeah,
trust.
I remember him. He came and spoke to us, I think at the library at a meeting maybe a couple of years ago.
Was he the 40R consultant?
Yeah.
So I got his resume, and it reads like a job description for the task that we have here. He's been very instrumental in working with 35 municipalities in Massachusetts on 40R. He allegedly participated in a task force which led to the passage of the state legislature, Chapter 40R in Massachusetts, Hartford, Connecticut. I don't know, just give this to Bill, and you can vet it out. But basically what we want to do is get access to this guy or the equivalent of somebody like this who can say, hey, that isn't going to wash, can't make that work, got to be deed restricted, you know, whatever we got to have. What are the rules? What do we have? What's the package got to look like to be attractive to the town of Hamilton and to the seminary?
Right.
Thank you.
Thanks. Joe, so you mentioned you've got to get rolling shortly.
Yeah. No offense.
Okay, no, I get it. Any other comments regarding these thoughts at Gordon at this point?
So, I think having manageable expectations, the less crazy the ideas as they end up being,
Totally.
the more likely they are to be executable.
Agreed.
So there'll be,
1,000%. Mike.
and I don't think you want to get too far ahead of Gordon. So I think you have some simple conversations with the consultant, and certainly I think the Affordable Housing Trust can help. Now,
Take a look.
now that we're no longer at the $6,000
Right.
budget
Right,
level that we were
right,
at a long
right.
time ago. So, but I don't think it's an expensive question. I think the more you have the questions well articulated, the cheaper you can ask for some feedback. And
We can ask DHCD like you suggested. I've asked them a number of questions. Russ asked me to ask them a number of questions, and
Yeah, so
they
with that-
were very amenable to answer.
so that might then simplify, you get up 10 questions, DHCD says, here's the answer for 5 of them.
Right.
You get a consultant or Carmen for some, to get the last bit. But I don't think you want to get too far ahead
I would
of the seminary. We're really playing with their property, and we don't want to play with other people's property. We also know that the seminary spun off their 19 acres. It's now a separate parcel. And that's land, not existing buildings. So
I think
so I just don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves.
Okay, thank you.
You asked for other thoughts.
I'm all ears, Mark. You've always got something good to say.
I'm sorry.
So, let's talk about new subject matter or additional subject matter maybe for the next meeting, and some meeting dates.
There is one thing, and I'd mentioned it to you. So someone in town found a senior who had a property that would be a lot like a Habitat,
Yep.
a scenario that could be purchased at one price point. It had a little bit of extra land. Maybe you get 1 or 2, like the Harbor Light, like the Habitat for Humanity. You get one unit now that has an already used accessory apartment, already permitted accessory apartment,
Yeah.
but maybe you break it into that 2 plus another building. So it would be expensive, perhaps. It would be a combination, and the question is whether or not we want to chase that type of thing. Maybe it's as simple as introducing them
To Habitat.
to Habitat. But it came up, and I wanted to bring it up to this meeting.
So I like the idea of making the introduction, I think, and that, to some degree, sounds like more or less what happened on Asbury a little bit, and it needs initially to make sense for Habitat, just generally speaking, and then see what Don thinks about it.
Because it may end up, because it's, you'd buy it for X, you'd improve the unit, and then you'd build a separate unit. So you end up with 3, and then you sell them, and I don't know where you end up financially, because what it would be up to.
Oh, we'd have to subsidize it.
Sort of not.
Yeah, but you wouldn't be building at least one unit from scratch. Right? There's a house and apartment in the that's already there, and you'd probably have to reconfigure
Right.
those, because they're probably not the right ratio.
Talking about Willow Street?
No.
No. Where's
And I won't go into the property or how it got up.
I think it's a good, start with Don and.
So just introduce to Don.
Yeah.
He's already looking
That's
at
a
2 other
good
properties in
Okay.
town, so.
Yeah, he's interested in doing more projects,
Yeah,
he
yeah,
said that.
He said it.
So, I think
Okay.
giving him more options to look at might help move that
Okay,
process along.
I'll do that.
Back to Don. Good. Thank you, Mark. Good thinking. Okay, so, want to talk a next meeting date? Want to talk about other things to talk about? I got to look at my calendar here.
If you're talking about changing the bylaw and going to Springtown meeting, I believe it's the 3rd week of February, which is the cutoff date to have that put together.
Okay.
I think the warrant closes, is that correct?
That's our goal, that's our hope. My understanding is that has not always been the practice in the past, but we're gonna do our best to do it this way this time, because we want to give town meeting ample opportunity to actually read all of the articles and recommendations prior to town meeting, so.
So is the 17th of this month too soon, or should we go to the very beginning of February? Or the 24th?
It's too soon.
24th?
About
Which
the
is,
24th. That's 3 weeks.
My only problem with the 24th is that we'll have a Board of Selectmen meeting on Tuesday night that week because of the holiday on Monday. And then on Saturday, we are going to be having a joint meeting with the FinCom for me to produce a budget
Do you think 4 weeks is too
proposal.
much?
And I'm a little worried that I won't have time that week to dedicate to. I've got to focus on the budget for the next month.
How about the 31st?
too far out.
You want to have meetings more often than once?
No, I mean, once a month is fine, but we've got to see if we can get this, this change to the bylaw
Okay.
kind of plugged in and stuff like that, and we might,
But can't you guys, I mean, you're going to draft it up and talk to Donna about it already, right?
Yeah, I think that the goal is for Dora and I to
Yeah, we could draft it
to
up.
draft
We
up
could do a-
some language and run it by Donna before we send it to you. I think, not to disagree with you, but I'm gonna disagree with you. I think a month out for the next meeting works for me.
I'm good with
because, that'll give us time to draft an amendment.
7th?
And run it by Donna, and then have it on you for the agenda to consider. And then
Or you
you'll
could
wanna
just
make.
email it out to us and we can all look at it, right?
Open meeting laws.
Once
Yeah.
shot, huh? Otherwise, we'll pick it to death.
Well, and just, what we can't have is you guys communicating back and forth about things that you want to do.
But we can to you.
You can to me, but then I'm tracking your changes and his changes and his changes, and
Yeah.
his changes contradict his changes, then,
Administrative stuff.
yeah.
so can we shoot for the 31st, which is a Thursday?
That would be okay with me, it would be after the budget gets presented, right,
So
Bill?
January 31st?
You okay with that?
Fine.
Okay.
What day of the week's that?
Thursday?
All right.
Okay.
I'll let you do
And
Thursdays in the winter.
Thank you.
So 6 PM?
Here, if we can do it, if it's available?
Yeah, it's
TV would be
available.
good?
I'm writing it down
Perfect.
right now.
Thank you.
6 PM?
All right.
So I can work on an agenda and send that to you, Dor. We know that one of the items will be the change.
Right.
And Joe, would there be some possibility that you're gonna talk to Dave Calhoun further a little bit between
will
now
try.
and then? I mean,
I will try.
I could send him an email tomorrow and ask him about the projects, because I do think I have.
Because I get nothing else to do next week. No, yeah, I think we should.
Welcome back from vacation. Boom.
You please do that, because I know that the board, this trust was looking for more information about the other projects they've done. So if you could do that, start that process, and once we get something back from him, I'll follow up with a phone call and see if I can talk to him some more.
Sounds good.
And have a little report out for you on that. Okay?
lovely.
I could also talk to some of the planners in some of the other communities to get a different perspective on how some of these projects worked. I know planners in Watertown, Marshfield, and some of the other communities are friends of mine.
I like it, Dor, I like it.
So I could talk to them and see.
Like a reference.
Yeah, like a reference, exactly.
You know, I do think that one of the things that, you know, kind of we discussed around the edges a little bit with Doug Trees and stuff tonight is that in most other communities where I've seen 40Bs get done, they take a long time, and generally they're more successful when their investment is coming from the private side and relying on that as opposed to relying on subsidies from either the state, federal, or local government. The minute you incorporate that investment of public funds into the housing projects themselves, it becomes a little bit more of an uphill battle, especially at the local level.
Yeah, and
There are more requirements put on them by the state and federal, and the local level, generally, local municipalities don't see it as their responsibility to create affordable housing.
I think the complication at Gordon Conwell is they have their own plan, whatever it may be, for their uses. You know, you're sort of coming up with alternative uses for their property for them. It may or may not include a full building. Whatever you do, you still have to work within their campus. I mean, you're still going to be outflowing to their septic plant.
Yeah.
You're still going to be relying on their traffic flow. The
Yep.
state doesn't like.
Good comment, yeah.
They could lease us a building to be managed by the affordable housing. I mean,
Yeah.
Hamilton, whatever.
Yeah.
Hamilton, how's
But
it?
getting the state to.
There's a way to put the deal
Now,
together.
if they could lease the
Providing everyone's
whole,
willing.
all the housing, like a land lease to the Hamilton Housing Authority, and if it would be okay to guarantee them enough housing for their students in certain buildings, then maybe the whole thing might qualify. That's kind of an out there thought, but that's a possibility maybe.
Yeah, and you know, in terms of capacity, knowing a little bit about what I know with the Hamilton Housing Authority, they don't have the capacity to take on 200 or 211.
No, but they would pay a management fee. I mean, or there'd be something generated by that to help support their effort, right? Because
Yeah.
It's complicated.
The simpler the better.
devil's in the no, but, right, whoever or we could have a third-party manager, whatever it is, hired by the town or something, but, somehow there could be some rent coming in, some fees being paid to manage the thing, whatever, we'd pay the ground lease, there should be some excess cash flow, I don't know, whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll just say personally, I'm not optimistic. I'm not overly optimistic that this is something that Gordon Conwell will even want to.
I would think not. They
Investigate.
wouldn't turn the control of the whole thing to us.
Right, yeah.
Lucky if we got one building, really.
And I think that, we need to present it to them in a way, as David kind of eloquently said, that they can see that it makes sense for them as well, not just for us.
Well, if they have vacant units that they're
But we don't know what their
supporting
plans,
somehow.
but we don't know what their plans for that are. And, one of the things that I've tried to remind the Gordon Conwell Task Force about is that, a pilot agreement or structuring some kind of compensation, monetary or not, to the town, that's in our best interest, but there is no imperative on the Gordon Conwell side. They are exempt. State law says they don't have to give us anything. So we're relying on their goodwill. And I want us to work collaboratively with them
I
to get
thought
something
this
out
is-
of it.
This seems like something that might benefit them a little bit. They're probably heating the building and, maintaining it.
Sure they are.
And if it's just sitting there, and if they could, if it somehow would benefit us and, it still would be a bit of a burden on them, like you're saying, with, whatever, snow plowing and all these crazy issues.
Well, yeah, so whatever they're doing snow plowing their campus, they're not gonna carve out that one building.
No, I know, but there's still expenses associated with that building
Yeah.
being occupied versus
It's-
empty.
What's probably more likely to imagine is long-term deferred maintenance. The more you've got under-maintained assets, the more they might be interested in, no, let's have someone else take responsibility for
Right,
them.
right.
Which is exactly where it gets complicated.
Right.
Oh, then we might have to pour some money into it to get it up and running.
Then what is the benefit that you're actually accruing?
Well, but, you
No.
could throw in some new appliances.
It's
for
worth the
a few grand a
conversation,
unit,
yeah,
and
but I just-
Do the roof for another grand a unit,
Well,
then you're good.
I want to investigate what the possibilities are and chase it down. I don't want to beat it up beforehand. I don't want to overly,
Kurt James's contact information. He started his own little firm that specializes in affordable housing called KJ. So he was with Rackman Sawyer for like a
Yep.
long time.
it's Kirk, K-I-R-K?
Kurt, yeah, James. And you should probably take Ted Carmen's thing that we just got.
Yeah, I was going to ask if you would, Dory, want to handle that? And then
Yep, I'll handle that.
And,
Well, so who's gonna wanna interview them? I think that it's really for the, whatever that, the Cromwell Trust thing.
Yeah, so,
Russ, those.
yeah, I think
Russ is on that too.
I'm on that.
No, that's why I gave it,
Yeah,
that's why I gave it. to him.
so let me talk with David Smith a bit further, the chairman of the task force. He's really got his arms around this in a big way. And
Okay.
he's very thoughtful. And let's just come up with a bit of a plan and maybe do a couple of phone interviews, and we'll come up with a document that is more or less bullet points,
So Kurt's an attorney, great guy, talk to anybody, loves the whole concept, he lives this stuff. And if he's not the right guy, he probably knows 100 people who he could refer you to,
Wonderful.
This Carmen guy seems like he is not an attorney, right? But
No, he's a planner.
He's a player, but he probably knows enough. But I think you're really looking for legal advice right
Yeah,
now.
I think so too.
I think so too. And as much as I'm all for, going the inexpensive route, if we're looking to see if something's possible, I almost favor the idea of bringing on an attorney that has some background in 40B, because DHCD is going to be focused on what the object of 40B law is. And they are going to try to give you, opinions that will support that goal.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And so
And
by
reusing properties, they might have
Reusing we know that they're not going to be,
Yeah.
that's not going to be
Substantially
high on
rehab
their
them
list.
first.
I think having it declared fallow is, the fact is,
So
I was using some big.
yeah, no, I know, but that's the point, right? It has to be clearly excess and not used, underutilized in order for the state to embrace it.
Right.
Because otherwise, the housing stock already exists. The fact that it's empty just means that it's lower price point, and it's gonna become affordable anyway.
Yeah, and hearing that description, Mark, and us on the task force having a general idea of, that they are underutilized up on the hill, it would make some sense that would, the optics of it would make it seem to be more appealing.
Yeah, like mutually beneficial too.
I think.
and
Sure.
all that stuff.
I think so,
it's,
sure.
you guys are as close to, people have talked about this since I started here, right? Or something like this, and it sounds like it's actually coming to a point where there's maybe something to really consider.
Okay. So we've got to try to close this out.
Yeah.
We'll meet on the 31st at 8 PM here.
Yep.
6
At 6
PM.
PM.
6 PM. So I've got a few line items for the agenda. I'll get back to you with perhaps some other things.
Okay.
Can I get a motion to adjourn?
Make a motion to adjourn.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.
Excuse me.